This is A Story of Sorts, the podcast mostly about bookish stuff, and I am your host, Karina Pereira. Hello everyone, on this episode I talk with Jabari Asim about his writing career, his experience as a teacher, and about his new novel, Yonder. Have a listen. Jabari, welcome to A Story of Sorts.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Tell us about yourself.
Let's see. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, Midwestern part of the United States. And I was a journalist for many years, more than 2 decades, before becoming a professor. So I did a lot of newspaper work before shifting focus to books and teaching.
And Yonder is your upcoming novel. And actually, at the time that we are recording this, your novel will be out tomorrow, which is the 11th of January. Can you reveal a bit about the plot to us?
Oh, sure. I mean, it takes place in the American South in the mid 1850s. So this is before emancipation, and most Black people were enslaved during this period. And part of enslavement was you couldn't make any decisions about your personal life, to say the least. But that included who you might take as a partner, whom you might fall in love with, whom you might have children with. And so in my book, there are 2 couples that fall in love, and they're forced to make a choice. Do we continue to endure under these conditions with uncertainty surrounding our relationships, or do we take a chance on something else? And so the story unfolds from there.
And do you remember when the idea for Yonder started to take shape, how you decided to write that particular book?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, the first lines came to me way back in 2008.
Wow.
I was walking down the street in Champaign, Illinois. I used to teach at the University of Illinois, and the first few lines that are actually in the book, I didn't change them at all. They came to me when I was walking down the street, and so I had a little notebook in my pocket that I kept for for such occurrences. I pulled it out and I wrote it down really quickly. But when I got back to my place, I typed it into my computer and I just made a file. I said, this is something that I will return to. I was in the middle of a bunch of other projects at the time, including a novel that became Only the Strong, which was my most recent work of fiction before this one. And I was deep into that, and I didn't want to put it aside. So I just made a note, 2008. And then several years later, when I was done with Only the Strong and I was ready to turn my attention to fiction again, I said, let me pull that out and see where that's supposed to go. Let me follow that line of thinking. And that's when I began to develop the book.
And was it like, did the story take different shapes across the years? Did you sometimes think about it? Or was it more like, I just put it aside and then when I have time, I'll really start developing it?
No, that's a very good question. And actually, I did think about it from time to time. I would sort of open up the file, and if a line came to me or an idea came to me, I would write it down. And then much later, I mean, originally, those first lines, it was just a simple first person story told by a single character. And over the course of time, it became a multiple narrator novel, which made it much trickier. But ultimately, I determined that was the best way to tell the story, because there were certain things that I wanted to happen that couldn't happen to the character who had been telling the story. So I said, well, I have to have other characters have these experiences and talk about them.
Yeah, because it's very interesting that you see, because reality is a bit what each person experiences, right? I mean, reality is factual, but in some ways there are very ways to see the same thing. And I think it's very interesting to see, it's like every other chapter or something, like there are these characters and you get to see their perspectives and what happened through their perspectives.
Yeah, because I mean, you and I, we could watch the same event, or we could even experience the same event. And then someone would say, Karina, what happened? And you would tell your version of the story. And then someone would say, well, Jabari, what happened? And I would tell my version. And they might say, well, we just talked to Karina and what she said sounds nothing like what you said. And it doesn't mean that either one of us is trying to mislead our listener, right? It's just we've perceived the same thing differently.
Yeah, in the theme of the book, because we are talking about enslaved people and the times that it was, especially then, I'm pretty certain. I also would like to talk about the title Yonder, because it's a
Mhm.
word that I noticed it comes up very often in the book. Did the title come after you started writing the story, and then you decided to put the word, or how did the title come to you?
The word was appearing before it became the title, and so in the course of thinking about possible titles, I at different points, the manuscript had different titles before I showed it to anyone. But yeah, I kept coming back to Yonder, and part of that idea is, or what I wanted to communicate was, these people live in a very confined area, and their knowledge of the world beyond this county, beyond this plantation where they live, is very limited.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of talk about what might be out yonder, what's there. So I kind of wanted the characters to speculate that about that a lot, because that's part of the fear of taking a chance of leaving confinement. Let's say you step off the edge of that plantation. Where do you go?
Yeah.
Where's the edge of where's the edge of the world? We don't really know.
Yeah.
And so I wanted that mystery to be part of it. And at the same time, Yonder plays a part in African American spirituality as a word for the hereafter, the life after this one.
Oh, that's
Uh,
very interesting. I had no
y-
idea.
yeah, there's more than one African American spiritual which uses the phrase "going up yonder." So going up yonder can mean dying and going to heaven, or in the case of enslavement, it can mean we're leaving and going north,
I
right? So it
think
has this double meaning.
I also feel like it's very pretty words.
Yes,
Like
yes,
Yonder, I find it a very pretty word. I don't know
me too.
how native speakers see it, but for me it sounds very nice.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I wanted a title that felt good coming off the tongue.
There are also instances of magical realism in the book, so it's not just the what could have been, or maybe stories that happened at the time, but you add the magical realism to it. Why that particular decision?
Well, I want to push back a little bit at the notion that it's magical realism. I mean, I appreciate the descriptions, but again, in African American culture, there is this belief that there is a permeable barrier between the spiritual world and the material world, right? And so, depending on who you're talking to, but there are many
Yeah.
people who believe that, and I kind of wanted to acknowledge that in the course of the story as it unfolds, that things happen,
Yeah.
and we might attribute that to magic. We might attribute that to, well, it happened because it happened, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to always acknowledge that, and at the same time, I mean, a lot of what we're calling magical realism in the novel is the intervention of ancestors, and ancestors play a part in my previous book, Only the Strong, and my previous work of fiction before that, even A Taste of Honey, because I'm personally fascinated with ancestors, right? So, and I believe that my ancestors intervened on my behalf, and I believe that I live and succeed as a result of their struggles, right? So I kind of wanted to infuse that philosophy into the story I was telling as well. There's this phrase when talking about one's ancestors, uh, because of them, I am. And so I wanted very much to sort of incorporate that philosophy into Yonder. These characters exist because their ancestors lived and struggled on their behalf, with this idea that in the future, in this very specific future, that one day Black people would be free,
Yeah.
right? And
Is
so
also is it also that idea that I was born in a small town, and I think also with religion it came that a bit, that you kind of believe on this guardian angel and people who look out for you, and I think it's also a way to deal with grief sometime.
yes,
And in the book there's also like there's these figures, and it's kind of protective of the people, and like you said, the ancestors.
yes, yeah. That there are people looking out for you,
Yeah.
in the best circumstances, and sometimes you might even realize that they are this angelic or magical presence, and other times you might not. You might not have any idea. It could just be a kind stranger who did something, nice and compassionate for you, and then later you could describe that person, and like I said, Karina, I was on this street corner, and this is what happened, and I stepped off the curb, and this man pulled me back. He pulled me out of traffic, and you could say, well, I was right there, and I never saw a man. I never saw anybody
Yeah.
pull you back from traffic, right?
Yeah,
So
no, for
yeah.
sure. For sure. I grew up with a lot of stories like that. Things that are strange that you can't, maybe there is like an explanation, like a
Yes,
more earthly explanation, but there are things
right.
that you just like, I don't understand how that happened.
Yep, yep, exactly. So I kind of wanted that to play a part in how the events unfolded in the book.
When did you figure out that you were going to become a writer? Because you just said you were first a journalist and then you became a teacher. I would like to actually talk first about that step. How did you go from being a journalist and then become a teacher?
Okay, sure. So I was an editor at various newspapers, most notably the Washington Post for many years. And while I was there, I started writing books, and so I would be invited to college campuses to give talks about my
Mhm.
books. And every once in a while, at one of the colleges, someone there would say, "Oh, you really should come teach here. You'd be great. You should think about this." And I always said, that's a good idea. I will think about this. And as time progressed, I got more and more interested in it. And I visited University of Illinois, and I gave a talk there based on one of my books. And the chancellor of the university was in the audience. And so he came up to me afterwards and said, "Man, what do you think about teaching here?" And I said, "Well, talk to me." And so that's how I ended up, teaching at the college level.
What are you teaching there? Because you're still
I
teaching, right? From what I
Yes,
understand.
yeah, I teach creative writing and literature. So sometimes seminars on, say, short stories or essays. I teach fiction and nonfiction, the writing of, and I teach mostly graduate students. I direct the graduate program here, but I do teach undergraduates from time to time. The program that we talked about earlier in the Netherlands was mostly undergraduates.
Yeah, we're gonna get to there in a bit.
Okay.
Then, so you basically you became a writer while you were still a journalist. When did you figure out that you wanted to become a writer? Was it like a conscious decision or something that just happened organically throughout your job?
No, I actually made a decision in college. I was about 20 years old, I think, and I was a political science major. And it was a good major, and I enjoyed it, and I did well in it. But I realized that I was spending the bulk of my study time on literature electives that I had been taking, um, not because they were more difficult, but because they were more fascinating. And I just kind of took a step back and said, what's the reason behind this? Why am I spending so much time with courses that really aren't a part of my major? I don't need to do this.
Mhm.
And it was because I just really liked it. So I changed my major pretty late in the game, became an English major. And at the same time, that I made that decision, I made the decision to become a writer. And I was fortunate that I had some good professors who were really kind mentors who gave me serious advice, like, okay, if you're going to do this, this is what you need to do. And this is, you need to practice most of all. You need to read, and you need to practice. So that was really valuable advice for me.
Just keep writing so you kind of keep the muscle going.
Yes, yes.
In your writing career, you have written several things: fiction, nonfiction for children, middle grade as well, poetry, plays. Do you have a favorite medium?
It tends to be whichever one I'm working in at the moment.
That's
You
good.
it's like when I'm working on, say, a nonfiction book for adults, I'm like, I love this so much, right? How could I ever do anything else? And then I'll turn around and write I'll be working on a children's project, and those are, really wonderful to work on. And I go, man, what if I just did this all the time? Just wrote children's books. This would be really nice. But then I work on another project and my loyalty shifts.
Yeah, but that's good actually, that you're actually not, you're so on what you're doing. Instead, the opposite would be more complicated. It's like writing nonfiction and feeling, oh, I really want to write fiction now. So it's good that it
Yeah.
works like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, that there will be another project beyond this one, right? And it might take a different form, and that's absolutely fine.
Do you have a favorite book? Because I actually, the question was a favorite story, but I'm putting everything into it, like fiction, nonfiction.
A favorite book of my own,
Yeah, like
or
something that you hold closer to your heart.
again, it's similar to my answer to your previous question. It's not the project I'm working on, but it's the project I've just finished usually,
So right now it's
because
Yonder.
yeah, right now, but I have other things coming out, and so ask me again in a few months.
Do you find it easy to combine your work as a professor with having a writing career?
I don't know if I would say that it's easy, but I would say that it's nurturing and it's beneficial. I think that the teaching helps me to be a better writer, and the writing helps me to be a better teacher, because I'm kind of always immersed in the question of how to best put together a piece of writing.
Because you have said writing is work, but it's joyful work. Do
Yes.
you agree
Yeah.
that because it's a funny thing that I see in writing communities, that most people who love writing also to some level really dislike it because sometimes it can be so tough?
Yeah, I wonder about that. I think those same people would fall into the deepest despair if you said to them, yeah, writing's so hard, so we're going to relieve you of writing. You don't have to do that anymore. I think they would say, what? No, I was just whining. I was just complaining.
Yeah.
Please let me write. So I'm never going to complain about writing. It's like it's a really privileged thing to do, and it's really wonderful. So I'm never going to be that guy that says, oh my God, I have to write today. Oh, it's terrible. Not gonna
Because I
happen.
do I do say that, and I'm speaking for myself some as well. Like, I'm not a writer, but I do enjoy writing, and I do writing gigs often, and I do feel that sometimes that it's like, oh, this is so tough. And you don't usually hear people who, with other jobs at least, loving it so much and sometimes hating it so much. And that's why I also thought it was that your quote was quite curious, because yeah, writing is work, but it is joyful work, but it
For
is
sure.
still work, of course.
Yes, yes. Part of that, I think that phrase comes from me really talking to my students when they're like, "Oh, this is so hard," and I'm like, "Yeah, I get that, but it's not working in a coal mine. It really isn't." You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sitting in this nice, comfortable chair in front of this nice, expensive computer. It's not. There's labor and there's
Yeah, no,
labor.
for sure. For sure. And you told me before that you've been in Rotterdam. Do you like the
Yes.
city?
I did. Yes, I spent a wonderful day there with an American colleague and a Dutch colleague, and I remember we sat out on a plaza and we ate and we drank and we just talked about all kinds of stuff and watched the people go by. It was pretty wonderful.
And that was because there's this project that you have, the James Baldwin Writers Colony. Talk to me about it. I would like to know what it is.
Sure. I teach here in Boston at Emerson College, and Emerson, as it happens, has a campus in the Netherlands, in the small community of Well. And so I taught for consecutive summers there. I taught students from Emerson, but from many other colleges. So it was sort of an international program. And part of it was, involved spending time in Amsterdam and Nijmegen and Rotterdam and Paris. We also went to Paris for, I think, a week. And yeah, so I got to spend time in the Netherlands and in Europe, and we looked for connections between European literary traditions and African American literary traditions, and we worked on our writing, and we went to cool places.
So the reason why the Writers Colony is here is because of the connection between the two schools in the US and in the
Yes,
Netherlands.
yes, absolutely.
And now it's not happening because of the pandemic.
Right. There's still Emerson's Netherlands campus is still open.
Okay.
But the summer programs, the past 2 summers, we decided it was too risky to,
Yeah, of course, travel and
conditions just weren't right.
of course. And are you going to do anything for when the book is out, like tomorrow? Do you have any, I don't know, online stuff going on to celebrate the release of the book?
I'm doing a number of virtual visits to different cities, but I'm starting tomorrow here in Boston, the Harvard Bookstore. I'm doing a virtual event, but yeah, I'm going to other other place. I put going in quotes because
Yes.
I'll be sitting right here, but I'll be appearing in various cities: Seattle, St. Louis, Chicago, Atlanta, Washington D.C. Places like that are
So
lined up. So I'm looking forward to that.
an online book tour.
Yes, yes.
And what are you working on at the moment?
I have a children's picture book coming out in September about a little boy's encounter with the boxing champion Muhammad Ali. It's
Wow,
called Me and
nice.
Muhammad Ali. And in December, I have a nonfiction book for middle schoolers called A Child's Introduction to Jazz. That'll
Wow.
come out in December. And
So two
for
books in the same year.
three, it'll be
Three.
three.
Okay, there's
Yeah,
one
yeah,
more.
yeah, yeah. And I'm also working on a collection of essays for Simon and Schuster
Okay,
called American Struggle. Won't be finished this year, but I'm working on it.
as well.
Yeah.
I would like to know, where can people find you online?
Let's see. My Twitter handle is at Jabari Asim, and my Instagram handle is the same. And on Facebook, it's Jabari Asim Writer.
And the book tour, will it be available somewhere on your website maybe, so people can join in?
Yeah, my website is presently being updated. So probably, actually, if you just Google me and put Yonder in there, everything should come up.
Great. Now, this is the last question of the podcast, and I would like to ask, because most people say it's the hardest one, and I would like an all-time favorite book and a book you would recommend right now.
Sure. All-time favorite book. It changes, but today I will say The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Dubois, which is a book I turn to a lot and marvel at its depths and layers and complexities. Just extraordinary genius there. And a contemporary book, I just read a collection of short stories by Rion Amilcar Scott, who is an American writer who teaches at the University of Maryland. And he has a collection of stories called Insurrections, which take place in a fictional community near Washington, D.C. called Cross River. And I think a lot of it.
Very well. Well, that was
Yeah.
easy. A lot of people try to kind of, can I say more than one?
Yeah, it's like I say, if you ask me tomorrow, I'll probably give you completely different answers.
Very well. Thank you so much for coming to A Story of Sorts.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You can access today's show's notes via my pod page, which you can find along with all of my social media links at linktree/Karina Pereira. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting A Story of Sorts on Patreon. Patreon is a platform which allows you to contribute monthly to the podcast in exchange for extra content, such as early access to episodes, a shout out at the end of an episode and on Instagram, and choosing a theme for me to talk about on the podcast. You can become a patron at patreon.com/A Story of Sorts. Leaving a review would also be highly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to get a notification when the next episode hits. I'll talk to you then, and thank you for listening.